Hello, and thank you for watching this video about choices and agency, which will constitute the main point of the second section of this course about games and fictional worlds. I'm going to be talking about choices, agency, choosing elements when you're writing, and choosing elements when you're consuming a video game, when you're actually in the player's seat. Agency is made of a lot of elements, which we are going to see. But first, a little outline of the expected, of the known, of everything that we've already seen. Agency is has very often been defined through Janet Murray's words. That's the satisfying power to take meaningful action and see the result of our decisions and choices. There are a few things to unpack first. It's satisfying, and that's very important indeed. And you can think about video games where you got frustrated because you didn't get to actually see, reap the seeds of whatever you sowed before. You take action that matter. That's very important. And there are results within the game of the within the instance of the game you're in, so that's very important. There are a lot of alternatives. There are possibilities that you could be choosing. It also depends on your play style as well, but that consequences are all part of the design, and you have to decide to cut off one limb and to save the other. Choisir c'est renoncer. That's a real thing. And in video games, you have to choose. You have to know to which degree the player causes significant change in the game world. And that is, of a paramount importance when it comes to envisioning agency in itself. There are a lot of different types of games. There are low agency games where there is almost no interactivity, and where the player is put. It's the case of some walking simulators, and we can bear in mind that it's not because a game is deemed a walking simulator that it does not actually entail important things that are going on. Important elements that will pepper their way of thinking, that will also provide with a rich narrative experience. High agency changes the world on the environmental scale as well. So you can choose to bomb up a city, and to bombard it till it you're only left with smithereens. You can decide to on the contrary, be super friendly to one faction and leave the others. And choices are very important. I'm thinking about Fallout because in order to, I'm advising you to go see Josh Sawyer's conference. I'm going to be talking a lot about this conference. It's about an hour long, but I think it tells a lot of things about how Fallout games specifically were created. That New Vegas, by the way, I'm going to be talking about it a little later, but so that it's out of our way. New Vegas was the game from the franchise which was not designed by the usual team, or rather by the usual studio, because the team took off with New Vegas, which is canon-ish. It's set after the third game, which was the first game where you had 3D and an actual like agency going on in the world itself. New Vegas still stays one of the most loved Fallout games because of its depth, and it's very interesting to see what the one of the executive directors had to say about architecturing the choices and the narration. But anyways, choices create agency. Choices are made at the very, very beginning. Whenever you play, actually, You choose things, and there have been a few things like Pierre Corbinet. Pierre Corbinet is a French designer who had the website Loujevipo, donc l'ouvroir du jeu vidéo poétique, if I recall correctly. And Pierre Corbinet has written, but it's not the first person to do that. It's not the first time I've seen it. But there are some games which are only made of character selection, character creation at the very beginning of a video game, because that's the moment when you're given a lot of freedom. You choose perks, you choose the gender of your character, you choose the physical appearance, and that is already a choice that may matter, or choices that may be only cosmetic, only for you as someone who's going to invest emotionally in a game. I also, so Pierre Corbinet has made a game like that, and I remember another game which was only made of a list of choices, which was the starting menu of a game. En fait, en full disclosure, j'ai pas joué au jeu de Pierre, j'ai joué à un jeu d'étudiants, il y a fort fort longtemps, qui donc n'avait fait que comment ça s'appelle, un petit jeu de sélection de personnages façon Heroic Fantasy. Est-ce que vous préférez jouer un mage, un druide, un machin? Et donc quand on disait let's play, donc un bout de cette création de personnages, il y avait quelque chose du genre et il vécut heureux une longue vie pleine d'aventures et fin du jeu en fait. Et donc c'est extrêmement c'est le genre de jeu en fait c'est des méta-jeux si vous voulez, des jouets, c'est-à-dire qui ne sont pas vraiment faits pour être joués et qui interrogent des dimensions méta. On pourra parler aussi de Synopsis Quest, qui est un jeu qui n'est fait que de micro-quêtes à la Wario, mais là il n'y a pas vraiment de choix. Là c'est vraiment, on joue que le moment de, on reçoit une quête, il faut qu'on la fasse et tout est bouclé dans 30 secondes en fait. Mais là, la question du choix et de l'agentivité, du fait de pouvoir agir, c'est extrêmement important, et c'est extrêmement important sur plein d'aspects, y compris des aspects qui n'importent qu'à vous. Peut-être que vous avez joué des personnages standards, mais réfléchissez aussi à, est-ce que quand j'ai joué, j'ai toujours joué machin standard, ou est-ce que j'ai passé 2 heures à customiser mon personnage? Voilà. Moving on, I also selected. I really like this definition. The website "What Games Are" is quite interesting, because it gives you in a nutshell, very interesting little definitions, and this is once again a retelling of Janet Murray's thing, the significant changes in a game. Low agency games involve no interactivity, but high agency games change the world or the state of objects within the world with every action, and that's a promise that's very exciting. And I like that other topics that were related were like boredom and busy work and death and nudging and all that. I will go into Sawyer's presentation a little later. There are things that you hear over and over again through game designers, through game analysis, and that's fine. We will, debunk, or at least look at, examine a series of things that come back again and again when it comes to creating a video game. So first, the idea that, choices should have consequences. Fabulich, I don't really know how to pronounce his name, but he's written a few rules as to how to create a game. Every option should have a real consequence. Well, the caveat, he adds, be careful because there may be a few little conditions that may apply. The caveat on one is it would be really cool if every game had a lot of branches and branching elements, but you would never finish writing your game. You can decide, as people who are going to design a game, you can decide to branch out and branch the story in afterwards. I will tell you about branching after, but it's always better, and I will repeat that again and again, always better to have small branches and, a lot of branches branching out and in together than big branches. It's always better to be able to create little leaves rather than big boughs. But really be careful about the scope of all the changes you or all the choices you may want to implement. Some choices may have effect on the player's imagination. If you change the gender of your character, this can influence the way you envision the character, even though it has no difference whatsoever in the way other characters perceive yours. It's important. Some games which also allow you to choose your pronouns also have an importance on how you envision and how your character is played, even though they are never referred to. It is the case of one visual novel I remember, which was called Hustle Cat, if I remember correctly. You had different sprites, not a lot of sprites, male and female like. Then you could, after that, choose the gender and the pronouns, which were never spoken. Because it was an automated game, so other characters would address you directly. It would be a you, and evocatives all the way. But it's still nice for you as the player to know that you can also have pronouns, and this is an old-ish game. I want to say I'm going to check it real quick. Hustle Game was created in 2016, which is, the very beginning of games that may be asking you for your pronouns. But anyways, second, a rule for Fabulich: a basis is needed to make a decision. Well, yeah, meaningful choices, the thing that we talked about before, is where there is a consented choice. If you have an adventure type of thing, choose your adventure type of thing, you can't really decide if you want to go up a ladder or if you want to go down the cliff after entering a new zone. The choice is going to be random. Good news, there is something that you can do, is to leave your, if you have choose your adventure type of book, you leave your finger and you create digitally a save point, and then you turn to page, to the bullet point 213, and you go, okay, if I, gotcha, if I go up the ladder, I'm gonna die, so I'm gonna choose the other one. But yeah, that's consented choice because you created artificially a save point. The game Ord, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a very simple game. Once again, it's available on Steam. It's a 2020 game. It's fairly recent. It uses that mechanic, so that it's a story which is only made of one word each time. So wake up, and then you decide go back to sleep, or rise up, and the story is constructed this way. It's just that it's built on the randomness of the choices you're given, and on the shortness, on the curt nature of the curt, like in as in both. C'est un peu court, mais c'est surtout un peu sec. On the curt nature of the things that are said to you, and you die. Or it is made of you doing it over and over and over again until you get the nice, good combination of words. That's just a way of, envisioning a game. Also, you see, like here, I put a screenshot from one family from Fibre Tigre. He just released it, maybe like, I don't know, end of 2021. Sometimes the life decisions that you take, you're not really, consenting to anything because you don't really understand. But, for instance, you can play a whole game without stealing ever, and get to the goal is to follow one family. You play all the members after the former has died, and you take life decisions after life decisions that impact a lot of stats according to which the character goes on living or dies. And The goal is to lead your family from minus 3,000 to 2,000 and maybe 2,600 or something. This so still in the 27th century or something futuristic where you can be the first person to live on Mars, I think. But the idea is really to try and get your family to be well, to stay alive basically. But yeah, yeah, and you understand how to play it. I advise. Well, you can try one family. It doesn't hurt. But well, option number, or rather, rule number three: no option should be obviously better, worse than all the others. Well, yeah. I mean, if an option is obviously better, I will go back on this later on a slide that Sawyer has provided. I mean, if choices are obviously better, you lose the agency of the player. So, yeah, I mean, you are going to choose something that will benefit the player. If I were to tell you, what do you prefer? A kick in the chin, or 3 million euros right away, no strings attached? I'm pretty sure that you would prefer to get the money for yourself and your family, or whatever, or just yourself, in order not to get kicked in the head. I mean, that's in the chin, but even in the shin, it would work. Dans le tibia, c'est pareil. Hein. Moi, je sais que je préfère quand même 3 millions d'euros à un coup de pied. Hein. Donc bon. Yeah, if an option is obviously better, you have to try and fix it. Also, you can try and hide the consequence of a decision, but it could be taken as sloppy work. I remember in Fallout, was it 1? There was one choice, Sawyer talks about it, but it's quite a common trope. A choice that is seemingly really good turns out to be bad. Very often when you have to reinstate a mayor of a town, there are two candidates, an obviously flawed and obviously good character. Well, sometimes the obviously good is not that great, and sometimes the obviously bad is not that terrible. And sometimes, keeping the bad guy in, I wonder if Outer Worlds hasn't done it. I think so, as well, with some guy that was rotten to the core, but who knew how to run a company really well, but was able to run the city really well, versus a guy that was much nicer, but who would have been a total wreck. And you get to choose the well, it's a consented choice because you want to help the good guy, but you're gonna have to choose the wrong one, and that's a tension that is interesting for the player. Next thing is know the people who are going to play your games. I mean, we don't play for the same reasons. You introduced yourselves with a very different, with a very heterogeneous experience of games in general. And there are many ways you can be a player, a board game player, a role-playing game player, anything. Fabulich separates three types of players that very often stand out, especially in role-playing games, especially when the agency, the choices made by the players are important. You have gamists, and gamists want to win. They want their characters to be successful. They want victory, but they want to attain victory. So they will, optimize their character sets and choices and stats and have things that work together. Look for the best builds. They also want big heroes where they accomplish great deeds. And they are people that want to, play the game for real. You also have dramatists. You have dramatists who want to tell great stories, even though characters are unsuccessful. And sometimes, when when you miss out, when you do something like, I supervise master's thesis. And sometimes I tell my students, well, if you're going to show us something that does not work, it's a good thing, and it's not because it doesn't work that is a failure. And it's exactly the same thing for narrativists. Dramatists think it's super interesting to have a tragedy and everybody would die and all that, but it makes for a good narration. Where a gamist would go like, well, it's unfair if everybody has to die at the end. It means that your story's imbalanced. Well, yes, but no. It's good to also have a choice. It's good to also have a lack of choice, because there is so much dramatic tension that. And last these are very broad profiles, but you also have simulationists. Simulationists want the game to be plausible, to feel real. I told you about no Darth Vader in a Lord of the Ring type of scenario. That's exactly it. They want options that make sense for their characters, even if it's not going to be a good choice for them in the long run. They don't want to win. They want to embody the character well. So they dislike unrealistic consequences. They dislike that their actions don't have any consequences. Well, and they would go like, that's not really what would happen actually. But you have other types of players. You also have explorationists, people who are obsessed with finding every ending, people who just want to experience the world and they want to try simple options out of curiosity. What happens if I reload this dialogue, but instead of saying that, I say this, And, well, that's also a nice way to play. But the problem is, if you're into dramatic tension and you're a dramatist, but you still have a player base that is made of gamists who really want to win, well, it's going to be hard to satisfy everybody at the same time. Satisfying all the goals, exploration and games and story and simulation is really hard. But you can try. You can try. And you can try and satisfy 3 out of the 5, or 3 out of the 4, whatever. So yeah, know your players and break the rules, because actually there are a lot of fake choices. There are games where it's okay. There is something that looks fine, but actually it makes no sense. Sometimes, you will have to flatter people and you will have an answer to provide, but it's okay. It's just as if I was to ask you if you prefer tea or coffee. It doesn't matter much, does it? Because you're watching this video from home, and me knowing, if I had a way to know if you preferred coffee or tea, I would have been in a lot of trouble. I would have been, it wouldn't have made any difference for us. And or it would have been not that great, because I wouldn't be able to provide you with those things anyways. So these unfounded choices may fulfill the need for exploration, add a little bit of drama, add an extra layer of interesting choices or character development for you, but really do whatever you want. And I'm spoiling the end of my lecture, but all the rules are meant to be broken, and that's the sad thing about agency, because you're agent of people, basically. It's also important to have intentional choices, and that's the reason why I put a little quote from Stilt. The player has, and that's the informed, consented decision. The player has all the information they need to make the choice. In practical terms, this means that before a choice, you signal the potential result. which stat is tested. And you know that some games do that. They have a charisma thing, or they have a speech check that is, and they indicate that if speech is below 75, you're not going to have a success. Or you can have an attack reaction. You need to know if the option needs to test of some sort. Or, within the frame of our game, uh, you can cheat, and you can just say that it will, and actually it won't. Or you can say that it may, and then you just put a randomizer and have something random, taken at random. It's like a roll of the dice, really. And you can decide to have on a 1 to 7, the person is going to fail, and on an 8 to 10, it's going to win if it's a 10 faced die. But yeah, intentionality is important, and you have to add it. You could have yes but reactions, or no but reactions. Like there is also the idea of a consented choice, which may have a secondary effect. The problem here is the problem of the signal. What do you signal to the players? What do people understand when they play your games? That's important. That is something that you should be very careful about. I'm not going to be showing you this video about the illusion of choice, because you have, the scope of the story and all. But, okay, I'm going to sum it up a little bit. Actually, some stats are not as important as others, and don't play as much a role as others. And that's the reason why gamists have guides and try and optimize their characters. There are a lot of moments where you feel you make a choice, and that is important. The fact that it's a feeling and not an actual thing. The feeling of agency is important, and it's what matters. When you think something is happening, this is super important. It's not the same thing as just using the environment for whatever you're doing. Actually, when you just look at the dialogues and everything, you have very few agency over what you have your characters do. It's a little bit like in real life, unless you're proposing to someone, breaking up with them, asking them out, saying something heinous to people in general. Things that we are going to do have very few consequences that are palpable. And maybe that's a good thing, but a certain lack of agency is also what it's like in real life. The consequences are important, and the consequences are a payoff of the risk and of the gains that you made. This video also advocates for shorter branches reconverging. So you have beads on the string type of thing. Think about the paths I showed you. I think it's not God of War. It was the architecture of Kodor, I think, Knights of the Old Republic, which was made on these beads on a string type of thing. It was not Kodor, but I'm not going to be able to, find it on the spot. The players reach choices that have little consequence, and then little consequence, and then little consequence, because that's real life. And then maybe at one point they will branch into another big state where all the little consequences have had different unlinear elements which branch together back. Little choices with little consequences don't really matter to the grand scheme of things, to the grand narrative and all that. But it does to the player. It does immensely. But it's a cost too, It's important to create a big thing. If you have a lot of branches, it's important to have them converge quite quickly. Be careful about that. Be careful about elements that you're not going to be able to have. I already told you about this. The cost of voice actors, the cost of having to also implement things, because this is going to be just I guess you're going to be writing a textual game here, but you may also consider that other forms of a game creation involve different things. The cost of VA, voice actors, the costs of having a rich environment in which the players will find books which will feed a codex, which will add elements to the story without showing elements of the story, diverging paths and dungeons and all that. Well, that's going to be a lot going on. So the idea that this video conveys, the illusion of choices, is to create smarter, not more, basically. But I mean, we're faced with a lot of dilemma, Is it possible? Can I click? Yeah. And here I selected the Arachnite Queen thing from Mass Effect 1. Do you kill the queen that is, it's a world where it's an ant-like people. There is an ant queen. You may want to end her life, knowing that she's the last queen of her. This is still the same video, by the way. It's still scrolling again and again. I have 45 seconds of it scrolling. Do kill the queen and cull this entire civilization, knowing that they may be dangerous, or do you spare them and on the promise that they won't harm others? And that's a lot of things, and as you can see, a lot of people have been annoyed with that and wonder if there is a consequence. There was no consequence in Mass Effect 2, if I remember correctly, like apart from a little email you get or something, in a reference in passing, and it becomes important again in Mass Effect 3. But as you can see, you have the question of doing renegade, bad runs, evil runs. You have the idea of doing something that is relevant to your way of playing Shepard. That's the reason why so many people were really annoyed with having to kill or spare the Arachnite Queen on her good word, on her good, because that these creatures are able to wipe civilizations off the map if they so desire, and they have desired so in the past. So it's really their word against yours, and dilemma is important. Dilemma is constructive. You also have, so I it's the spiraling thing going on again. You had this conference, Do and Say the Right Thing by Sawyer, who was talking to the GDC, the Game Designer Conference, which is super important. All their conferences are online. If you're interested in these types of videos, they are immensely informative. They have a lot of post-mortems as well, so analysis of old games, to see what happened, what worked, what didn't, and all. So this is a 1 hour conference. That's a big conference, obviously, and he tells us of different types of choice architecture on Fallout New Vegas. He tells, I'm gonna do a very short summary of it. There is character agency versus story agency, and how the story unfolds depends on you, and that is story agency, which was something new, which adds a new layer to Murray's definition. The types of choices you want to give the player as game designers is the idea of tactical choices for the short-term tactics that they're going to be using. Do they want to attack right now? And you also have like strategic long-term choices that you make. You implement a system of karma. Karma is an indirect choice direction, and you choose to be good to one person, and that person's happy, and you solve the story. But you gain on the renegade, on the evil and good. I think there is no word, but maybe there is one. It's just that I can't remember it right now. But there is an axiological scale, from evil to good, and you gain points towards the nice guy type of thing. You build reputation. You become better. People are gonna be calling you Messiah and all that. You can also forecast consequences, the losses, and the wins that you have. Within the game, there is nothing that is neutral, really. Oops, sorry. Uh, Neutrality is achieved through nothing, really. The type of choices and the layout of these choices is not made at random. If like for instance, the order in which the indications are given, in a dialogue are not at random. Usually the top one is the default one because it allows players to just click 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 one and be done with a dialogue, if they don't want to enter into too much details. But actually, you could choose to put goodbye at the top and infuriate your players. You can choose to have the attack option on top. If you do that, it means that they're going to have to slow down because maybe they did not want to attack, but be super careful about this. The default option with one thing, that is Black Isle, that is something that is inherited from Black Eye, so it may be not true for all types of games. It's not true for games where you have like a ball and you have to choose from by moving your mouse, where there's no one to click on. But yeah, be careful about these little elements, these subtleties that show you that games are much more than what they just seem to be. You can also try and see what the character's expression is going to be like. You can have characters around you not react to anything you do, and that's super sad. I remember Icewind Dale. Icewind Dale is an old, old role playing game on the Dungeons and Dragons system. And after saving the whole world, I remember that after the end of the game, I went back to a city, and the people treated me there just the way they had from the beginning of the game on, like 30 hours before. But I had killed whatever menace was threatening the order of the world and all that. That was terrible. That was bad. I mean, it's such a disappointment. The thing is, also, if you expand your scope of responses for your player, you're gonna have to expand the scope of responses from the non-playable characters and the NPCs around you. This is where you may have problems as well, because, well, you're gonna have to write a lot of responses. You can also have an anything goes type of scale. That's what happens in Fallout, basically, where you can just decide to kill people, and that's gonna be fine. But there is a problem if the scope of response of reactivity is huge. The only thing is, it's not gonna be very consistent. Like in Fallout, you can't really lock yourself out of a certain type of responses if you've given, like if you've been super good, there is no moment where you can't turn bad. Which is not the case in Mass Effect, for instance. The triggers for Renegade and Paragon, so evil and good characters, are awarded to you as you progress throughout the whole I want to be good, I want to be bad scale. It's not the same in Fallout. You also have to, so once you've established how the scope of the game were working, how you want the conditions to be. Once you define the character and the player's expressions, you may establish narrative goals. A piece of advice he gave, which was super interesting, I think, is the fact that you have to establish goals by fusing content. You have informational and emotional content, which have always to be put together. But you have to separate critical information from optional information. Critical information, you need to have it. Optional information, that's the read more section. You know how sometimes characters are written to tell you of their backstory right away? That's sloppy work. Don't do that. If I remember an example in Mass Effect Andromeda, there was one, I believe, an engineer who turns out to be a trans character because of sloppy work on the part of game writers. Actually, this element, which belonged to the lore of this character, was included super early in their dialogue lines. I don't remember what it went like, but it was probably something like, "Hello, my name is so and so, and yeah, it works really well for me here, even though before I used to be so and so, and blah blah blah." This, shocked the players because obviously this is sloppy work. This is optional information. This is something that you may want to dig for if you get friendly enough with that character in order for them to disclose these types of very personal information that you would never say to a foreigner like this, to someone that just arrived on your space station, on the same, to take another example from that, uh, the critical information that you need in a video game, and very often you're sent on a very small quest, on a very narrow quest. You need to get us the egg of power, and it's in this village. Well, turns out this village actually has been wiped out by a plague. The plague has been sent by the contenders to the throne, which actually live in the province nearby, province that you can't reach unless you have a flying something. And this is the beginning of a story. And as you can see, the initial information is just go get the egg. And that's critical information that you need. And then you will infer the rest from travels, from talking to people, and so on. Do not hesitate to write story and lore as hints hidden within dialogue lines. Even if you have a little something, if someone tells you of a little rumor they heard, this is enough to inform your player, who does not need to have you make them read like super long texts. That's not how it works. I mean, you can smell it from like miles away. You also have to outline the informational content. You need to tell what it is and to be sure of what you're doing. That's exactly in your Twine or even your mind map apps. Je ne sais pas si vous allez écrire votre plan sur Twine ou sur des mind maps, mais vraiment, il faut aller au plus petit. Il faudrait vraiment qu'il y ait un espèce de plan général du jeu qui serait tac, 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 chercher l'œuf, voir ça, parler avec machin, c'est votre but. Une fois que vous avez parlé avec machin, etc., etc., voir le docteur, voir le volcan de trucs, c'est la fin. Hein, et là, en fait, une fois que ces grandes choses sont résumées, et une fois que vous avez un vrai squelette, vous remettez les choses dans le squelette. Mais pas de l'autre côté. Enfin, vous commencez pas par un monde monstrueux, extrêmement foisonnant de petites créatures et gna gna. Et il se trouve que dans ce monde, patati. C'est tentant. Je sais très bien que c'est très tentant. Mais non, là, c'est vraiment, on écrit, on rajoute au squelette et on met pas de la chair dans laquelle on va bourrer un squelette, quoi. Vous voyez ce que je veux dire avec ce truc un peu élégant, quoi. Once again, more branching is better than bigger branches because you can backtrack and add reactivity, but to your own, to your own discretion. If you want to write more, less, if you want to write better, if you want to have different types of dialogues, just go for it. And as you can see, this is super quick, that this is still part of Sawyer's presentation. The dialogue styles do not differ dramatically from the styles of narration in a game master's envisioning of a scenario for a role-playing game. That was a long one. But I mean, it's not because you have cinematic elements of dialogue that, Uncharted is not a good game. I kind of like this, in Diablo 3, you don't really know what you're going to get. and sometimes you're gonna get something totally different from the expectations. Well, Diablo is okay for with that, they're very lax, but well, and branching trees is Fallout, is Mass Effect's main way of envisioning dialogues, anyways. And uh, yeah, um, choices mean pacing. There may be a continuum between action and text, and the sorry for the I don't know why I probably did not paste my quote entirely. Ingold's article about adventure in probably in text narratives tells us about this. More text equals yeah, a lot of different things. If you have choices, you may have actions and responses. Choices, when in your text, provide some tension, and they can be built on top of one another, and you can, infuriate a character more and more and more and more. They can also be helped to show the player that their choice matter. They can also call back to things that you did before. And okay, action is super, and you want, probably if you're in an action game, you want actions. But things like indicators on screen, like Pete will remember that in The Walking Dead, shows that your actions matter. You indicate that people are going to remember your actions, and that is important. So they add little things from the player, but on an spoken level, which is going to be completed by the action continuum, the action part of the continuum, where here you're just going to show that things are progressing through what you do and not what you say. But these indicators are very nice additions to your games. They can definitely help you write more. So far, so good, but yet all the things I said may be counteracted, and there are at least one counter example that I know of. And I mean, I play video games, of course, but I'm not the god of video games. So if I, with my experience, know one difference, one thing that will not be what I've been telling you about, then it means that y'all will know other things that are different choices as well. Choices without consequences are fun, can be fun. And sometimes they reflect on the opinions of the player themselves. And that is something that Josh Sawyer was not happy to see, that in Dragon Age 1, for instance, there were choices without any consequences. For instance, the end of the Great Warden was not very satisfying to him. He doesn't say it expressly, but he shows a screen capture of the ending of like one of the final moments of Dragon Age 1. But you know what happens to the Great Warden is a character you play. You know what you play is important, and it's important to you. So these choices are fun to make. These choices are important as well, and I've been joined by Milton for the end of this lecture. So I apologize for purring in the mic. The things that you can see are in the Planescape Torment screen grab I made. Planescape Torment is an old game. There was the second one that was released in 2018 or 19. I don't want to mess up. Maybe a little before than that. And it was such a shame for the old players, because old players were used to that. Ravel is, if I remember correctly, a sorceress, and asks you a lot of things. What changes the nature of a man? And your answer is a lot of truths, love, hatred, and power, and greed, and betrayal, and success, and all that. And you can lie, a beautiful woman, Ravel, as you changed me. And yeah, you can also go for, I cannot answer that question, and this is going to be fine. And whatever you say to Raven is not going to have much influence on the game. It's going to have influence on you as the player, as the person behind the seat who knows what's what, who knows what's going on, basically. Be careful also with the too much choice, because vous savez, trop c'est trop, and I'm so sorry for the content of the next slide. This is again one of Sawyer's slides. It's such poor taste, but well, it is very telling. Choice extremes, like Sophie's choice or the Jesus Hitler trope, are important as well to keep in mind, you know. Jesus Hitler, you probably heard of it. Neither is too compelling, especially in the fact that you're playing a game. If you have like a poor woman that is in dire need of help and you're a knight in shiny armor, what will you decide to do to help them? Do you if the woman goes, oh, I need help because blah blah blah, are you gonna kick him in the face, kick her in the face, and take her money and run, and maybe like pillage her village? Maybe, you know, that's the Hitler part. Are you going to help everybody and everyone without any questions and with just the sense of duty accomplished, like a little Jesus? You may do that, but this sounds flat. You need something in between. You need to have things that will matter to you as well. Things that will show, that will spell out how you envision your characters, how you envision the characters' development of the player to be. Sophie's choice is easier to, well, it's easier to make, is still a nightmare. You probably know the book, which spawned a movie adaptation with Meryl Streep. During the Second World War, Sophie has to decide which one of her children has to die. And, I mean, that's just a shit choice, isn't it? It's just the alternative that we are presented, either one or the other, is just atrocious in nature. And if it's too hard to make, and if it's there is no good payoff to that, it's just a terrible choice all over, then it's a bad choice. You know, it's a bad decision maybe. But you may have works like here, Lisa the Painful. It's a game which I enjoy immensely. I advise y'all to play Lisa and to try Lisa, because I think it's cleverly done a lot of things that other games haven't been able to. Once again, I'm going to check the year real quick. It's 2014. I thought it was much older than that. It's a game where you play this character, Brad, who is looking for his daughter, Lisa, that you can see here. And, well, I'm going to spoil the game heavily, so remember, if you want to play the game and if you don't want to get spoiled, you know, resume the video when I switch to the next slide, or, you know, just like mute me for a few minutes. Okay. The game tells of Brad in this world where there are no women except for Lisa, who is the only female character, only female in the world. At the very end of the game, this is an image taken from this. Brad, who has sacrificed limbs, may end the game without any arms going on, without a nipple as well, which is very strange. But well, who will finish also the game as a drug addict, finally finds Lisa. Lisa, as it turns out, has run away because he's a shit dad. He's a shit person. He's a, is a liar. He's a drug addict. She does not want to live with him, so she just decided to go away, and she got abducted because that's a post-apocalyptic world where everything's terrible, But yeah, Lisa has just fled, and he made a lot of wrong things. But that does not mean that for the player, this is a bad thing. This means that it was a bad thing for the Brad, the character himself. And this makes for good writing. Even though, at the end of the game, I mean, is barely more than alive, and yeah. She abandons him, and he stays and just like becomes a monster corrupted by drug abuse, basically. So yay. There are a lot of things that you can look at whenever envisioning choices. You can create fake choices, flavor choices, like the thing I told you. Which drink would you prefer to consume when you're watching this video? What do you want my cup to be full with? Is it going to be tea or coffee or rum or whatever? Real life decision is coffee, but if you're happy with putting whatever in my mug, that's fine by me, unless it's spiders. I'm not liking that much. You can also have a lot of choices that will be established through what and that will change things right away, or through stats that you have. You may also have choices that will have the story diverge from one path to the other. But well, you have other types of choices, life or death ones, points based, chronological, inevitable choices, which are non-choices, expressive, weak choices, and so on, unfair choices as well. On that note, but maybe I'll end about that a little later. Keep in mind the expressive choice thing. There is a nice lesson, I think, to be learned from this article by Josue Monchan. It's a 37-page long article, so it's quite hefty. And Monchan talks about Telltale's The Walking Dead. In The Walking Dead, there is very little agency going on, and agency does not come from the plot, because the series uses agency to shape how the player sees the character himself or themselves. Agency is not a matter of choice as well. The agency is the fact that in this game, it is made through maybe lack of choice. Agency, how the person reacts, how the game reacts, is made of something a little different. The idea behind Monchan's paper is to go against Murray's definition of agency. The whole thing with what is it? Meaningful actions, decisions, choices, and the satisfying power type of thing. But here, really, the idea of agency is that strategies used by the player, strategies created by the video game, create agency. So it's a little different. Monchan uses the example here of this character. This is a terrible thing. You have a few choices here. So Clementine locked in a room, hears people talking, and you can say either I'm here, let her out, or it's Lee. No matter which one you choose, well, the kidnapper will immediately attack Lee, and Lee will not be able to answer anything. And when he wasn't supposed to answer all these things. The most meaningful effect should transfer his lack of agency to the player, which means that the game must ignore Clementine's choices. Agency as choice is absent from plot based decisions, and this constitutes a kind of agency, the direct effect of being unable to choose in a world that countervails every attempt that characters make to control it. Story driven choices are choices made on the player, actually, and not entirely by the player. And I think this is a very crucial distinction. Agency can also be constructed by the player and not, in any other ways. So Sarah Stang wrote an article called This Action Will Have Consequences. And she tells about interactive video games that create a strong illusion of interactivity. The player interprets the game text, the engagement with fan communities, the engagement with headcanon as well, with the engagement with very small details like so and so will remember this, creates an exchange and creates agency. If you're unhappy with the ending of a game, you may, go out and demand for it to be changed, like exactly what happened with Mass Effect. You can also write an alternative universe. Here, as you can see, that this is taken from Doki Doki. The character asks you to help them, and she's looking directly at you. I'm not going to spoil this game, and I'm assuming that everybody's played Doki Doki. But actually, please help me. You're not given the choice to click OK. She takes the agency away from you, and yet, you kind of feel, or rather, some players have felt the need to help this character, Monica that was in danger of self-harm, basically. Patrick Moiran a spoken about jeux vidéo and livres dont vous êtes le héros. Je veux dire, là, je passais un peu en français. C'est un article fait en français. Je veux dire, le mec s'appelle Patrick Moran. Ça peut peut-être vouloir dire qu'il est français, encore que. Hein. Et donc, lui, il parle de narratologie cognitive. C'est-à-dire que vous faites un choix. Et vous faites faire un choix à votre joueur, mais c'est le ressenti qui compte. C'est comment la personne prend le choix qui est important. Parce que je vous ai déjà dit tout à l'heure, les livres dont vous êtes le héros, vous pouvez mettre votre gros doigt, ou votre petit doigt, hein, et puis dire, très bien, ils me disent, allez, soit à 83, soit à 112, et ben je vais regarder et 83 et 112, et puis voir lequel des deux me plaît le plus. Mais en vrai de vrai, est-ce que les choix ont été relativement bien écrits? Est-ce qu'ils ont été assez bien écrits pour que vous ayez envie d'aller à 92, etc. Ça, c'est une question qui est extrêmement intéressante. Ultimately, the issue that we're left with when all is said is done is the question of the why. Why do we care so much about choices? We want to constrain people, We want to create consequences. But the subversive nature of play, the unstable material nature of video games as digital artifacts, claims that actually their agency is everywhere, is outside the expected, is outside through modding and performing and cheating and super playing games as well. You probably know it, but computer assisted speed runs, which are called TES, and I forgot what the T stands for. Speed runs are a type of playing which gives very little to the game itself. Through great game breaking details, you can decide to go a little further, a little faster, go through zones that you would not be able to cross that fast. But these are ways you play, and these are voluntary choices made by players, which go entirely against the wills of game designers, such as, you, basically. That's a big problem as well. There are a lot of things that we want to do. you can cheat your players into thinking that their choices matter. Je veux dire, rien ne vous empêche quand vous créez votre jeu de rajouter des petits écrans qui disent il va se passer de ça et ok. Vous savez, sur Twine, vous pouvez créer des prompts qui vont ouvrir une petite une boîte de dialogue, un peu comme celle-ci en fait. Hein. Ça pose absolument aucun problème sous Twine de faire ça. Et en fait, donc ça fait sortir un peu le jeu de sa propre de son propre cadre. Et ça, c'est extrêmement important. Mais je veux dire, on a envie de croire dans ce que fait le jeu. On a envie de se laisser manipuler. On a envie de se laisser porter par l'histoire. On a envie que les choix aient de l'importance. On égale joueur comme game designer. Donc on a envie à la fois que l'univers, le personnage et le joueur aient de l'importance. Pensez encore à la façon dont créer un scénario de jeu de rôle fonctionne. Parce que ça, c'est extrêmement important. Et donc, toutes ces choses-là créent ce besoin d'inventivité. On a besoin de garder la main. Pensez à tous les discours négatifs à l'encontre de ah bah c'est vraiment nul, un walking simulator, vraiment ça ne sert à rien, etc., etc. Pourquoi est-ce que c'est vraiment nul pour ces gens-là? Et pourquoi est-ce que c'est pas vraiment nul en fait? Ça, c'est des questions que peut-être voilà, pourraient vous intéresser pour plus tard. Anyways, thank you for watching this video, and I will see you very soon in class, I think.